Greetings, Scribblers. Kent Shawn here, and today we're going to talk all about genre, so prepare to get your mind blown. Before we get started, and if you haven't done it yet, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss one sentence of sagacious writing advice. There is a lot of information in this video today, so you might see me referring to my notes from time to time in order to speed things along, and to cut down on jump cuts. Jump cuts, jump cuts, jump cuts.
Jump cuts.
In my video, 10 tips to nail your first draft,
Link in the description.
my number one tip was to know your genre. There are a lot of ways to think about genre. If you ask a literary agent, they'll probably explain it to you from a marketing perspective. That means they'll tell you what section your book belongs in. Swords and elves? Gallop over to the fantasy section. Scary monsters? You belong in that dark, shadowy corner over there called the horror section. Love stories? Head on over to romance. Wear gloves over there, guys. Tends to get sticky. I like to think of genre as a label that tells prospective readers what they can expect out of your book.
Do not label.
Different 10-pound brain story nerds break this down in different ways. Sean Coyne, author of The Story Grid, which I highly recommend, breaks genre down into 5 different categories. The categories are time, reality, style, structure, and the last and probably the most important to writers, content. Content is what I want to focus on today, but to keep us from getting completely lost in the sauce, I will go through a brief description of the other 4 categories of genre. Time genre. Time genre simply tells us how long the story is going to be. Think small, medium, and large. Short stories and scene work on the small end, novellas in the middle, and epic poems and novels on the long end. Reality genre. Reality genres are the ones that tend to cause the most confusion for writers. There are a lot of these, like realism and absurdism. If you want to know what absurdism is, go watch a little movie called Spaceballs. But the ones that really get writers' heads spinning are science fiction and fantasy. Don't get me wrong, reality genres like science fiction and fantasy are very important, and choosing to write in one of those usually gives us a warm, fuzzy feeling of comfort and security. Unfortunately, even after choosing our reality genre, us writers still have pretty much all of our work still in front of us. Style genre. Style genres are the way we experience a story, like comedy, drama, cinematic, etc. In Story Grid, they also list poetry as a style genre. But to me, not every poet gets to call themselves a storyteller. Go on Instagram, type in the hashtag Writers of Instagram, and you will instantly be confronted by millions of square yards of poetry, featuring many correctly spelled words. Go ahead, read some of it. I dare ya. Judging from Instagram, the 2 qualifications necessary for becoming a poet are number 1, owning a cell phone, and number 2, being really upset about something. I mean, these guys are really depressed. Don't get me wrong, there's some good poetry out there. I myself have been known to jot down a line or 2, and then read it in a snooty accent. Roses are red, violets are blue. Will you still respect me if I wear underoos? The next genre category is structure. These are arch plot, mini plot, and anti-plot. The vast majority of authors writing long-form commercial fiction write arch plots. This simply means we experience the story in the same way we experience our life, in a straight line. No messing around with time. Arch plots usually follow the straightforward 3-act structure, beginning, middle, and end. Now it's time to get down to brass tacks. The last and most important category of genre is content. For me, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we drill down and figure out what's really at stake in our story. Each of the content genres we're going to discuss has a central value at stake. This is an incredibly important piece of information that should constantly be on our minds as we write. Stories are about change. In every good story, in the beginning, things are one way, and at the end, they're another. If things don't change in your story, you haven't written one. It's basically just an outrageously long description or potentially an instruction manual. Okay, bear with me. I'm about to go full story nerd on you.
You never go full nerd.
The genre-specific global value at stake is the human judgment of reality that can change along a spectrum of positive to negative or negative to positive. Confused yet?
He went full nerd.
What this means is that your story will turn on one big global value that is defined by the content genre you choose. For example, in an action story, the global value at stake is always life and death. If things go right, the hero saves the victim. If things go wrong, the villain shoots his giant death ray and blows Schenectady to pieces. Life is the positive, death is the negative. Content genres tell you what the global value at stake should be in your story. I could probably do an entire video just on value shifts. If that's something you're interested in, please let me know in the comments below. There are two types of content genres, internal and external. This refers to how the conflict and the value at stake relates to the main character.
Protagonist?
Yep, the protagonist. Alright, the external content genres are action, horror, crime, western, war, thriller, society, performance, and love. In these kinds of stories, there's no messing around. The conflict is right out in the open where you can see it.
There's Waldo!
In an action story, the villain is after the victim. In horror, it's the giant, fanged, drooling monster that hides in every kid's closet.
Wait. What?
Not really, James. The first and my favorite content genre is action. The key element to the action genre is that it's all about the villains. They're the driving force behind the action, and one of their dastardly deeds is what gets the story rolling. All action stories always have a hero, victim, and villain, and there is always a threat of physical harm. Next up is horror. The core value is also life and death, but the horror content genre isn't happy to just threaten our heroes with death. It takes it even further down the line to something we call the fate worse than death. In a lot of horror novels, dying would be a relief compared to what the monster has in mind. The monster is the key to the story. If you're writing a horror story, coming up with a really frightening zombie horde, drooling werewolf, or slimy alien should be your top priority. In the crime genre, the value at stake is justice versus injustice. The way you start your crime novel is with, bing, you guessed it, a crime! Hit your readers with a compelling crime that cries out for justice to be served. Then take your protagonist on a mission to set things right. The Western. I hesitated to include this as a content genre because, number one, I don't know anything about it, and number two, it kind of blends into a lot of other content genres. But since there's a metric shit ton of it on bookstore shelves, I thought I'd show it some respect. Westerns can have several core values at stake, and I'm going to read them to you right now. Wilderness versus civilization, society versus outside society, and like 10 others. If you have questions about writing in the Western genre, I'm not the guy to ask. Next up, the thriller. The thriller is basically a giant mashup of action, crime, and horror, all swirled together in a giant bucket of awesome sauce. The value at stake is life to death to the fate worse than death. The thriller is all about real-life scary people that we all hope end up in jail before we find them somewhere with a freezer full of heads. In the thriller, the villain is never satisfied with just killing the hero. Nope. He wants to psychologically torture them first. A great example of the thriller is The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. The war genre is all about victory versus defeat. The central event of the war story is the final battle. That's when we find out if our heroes win the day or suffer the shame of defeat. War stories range from historical epics based on facts to space opera, science fiction beatdowns on a galactic scale. The society genre has about 1 million different values at stake associated with it, depending on the political proclivities of the reader. It can be the feminine versus the patriarchy, or power versus impotence. Usually the author is trying to make a big statement about something that's gone wrong with society. An awesome example of a society novel is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Up next is the performance genre. Send Rudy in, coach! Here the global value at stake is respect versus shame. Some common types of performance genre stories are music, art, business, and sports. Will our musician nail the big recording contract? Will the hot young lawyer win the big case? And obviously the central event of most sports stories is the big game. The last but definitely not least content genre is love, more commonly referred to commercially as romance. The value at stake in a love story is love versus hate, or love versus isolation. People really go crazy for this one. Most people I know that read love stories are addicted to them like an illegal narcotic. Some of the critical events in the love story are the first kiss and the proof of love. Those are the external content genres. In the internal content genres, the conflict is all inside the hero's head.
There is nothing in there.
There are 3 of these internal genres: worldview, morality, and status. In a worldview story, the value at stake is based on how the main character thinks the world works.
Protagonist.
Yeah, protagonist. The most popular of the worldview genres is maturation. This means the character moves from naivete to worldliness, and it's really hard saying either one of those words. Morality has a couple different value shifts to choose from. For example, For example, willpower versus temptation, or redemption versus damnation. And the third internal content genre, status, revolves around a change in the main character's social position. This is kind of a rags to riches scenario, or potentially the other way around. Whew! Scribblers, that was a lot to get to, but this stuff is really important. Understanding the core value at stake in your novel is a game changer. When you get stuck in your story, always go back and look at the global value at stake. Make sure your major scenes and plot points turn on that value. This will keep the fans of your genre turning pages and buying books. Coming up soon, I'm doing another video on genre. This time I'm going to talk about obligatory scenes and conventions, so stay tuned. To learn more about genre, I highly recommend that you check out Sean Coyne's book, The Story Grid. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and please visit my website, kenshawn.com. Till next time, Scribblers, butts in seats, fingers on keyboards.